Hi, everybody. Recording in progress. I'm Calvin Schwartz. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. And this is Christmas. Actually, we're 10 days from Christmas, which means this is December 15th. And I'm with Wanda Stansbury, and she's from CCFA, which is the Center for Child and Family Achievement in Trenton, New Jersey. And we have a lot to talk about that. I just wanted to say how Wanda and I always like to talk about connectivity, how do people get put together? For many, many years, I sat at the Rutgers women's basketball, and I sat next to a wonderful family, the Gala family. And they actually became kind of like when you spend 20 days a year for years together watching Rutgers women's basketball, you become a family. And so Michael had reached out to me because part of his family is Wanda. And we then Zoomed and chatted, and the work that is being done by CCFA is wow. And I've got a little platform here to share that. And it's Christmas and the spirit of giving. And CCFA can use help and support. And that's why we're here for us to talk about the center the Children's Center for Child and Family Achievement. I always have to spit it out the right way. That's my little intro, but we have so much to talk about. So Wanda, what a pleasure to introduce you. If you can do a little bit of a bio, so bring people up to date with your life and your journey, and then we'll jump into CCFA.
Thank you, Calvin. I appreciate you having me here. And what resonates so much with me is this idea, your vision for the species, that we are all one people. And I applaud you for this
thank you.
Wonderful vision that you have of connecting people. And thank you for having me. I want to start out by saying I'm a kid from Red Bank, New Jersey. My name is Wanda Webster Stansbury. And my two parents worked very hard to expose me to a broader idea of who I could be. I was born in Jim Crow America in 1950. And my family traveled from North Carolina to Red Bank, New Jersey. And with my 5 siblings, including myself. And so my dad, King Webster, my mother, Josephine Webster, gave us this wonderful exposure to growing up in Red Bank. And I have such great memories of my teachers and my schoolmates in that wonderful town. And as a child on our journey from North Carolina to New Jersey, we left behind signs that said, colored only, white only. And I remember talking about my dad about that when we were in his brand new 1950 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, and we couldn't stop to go to the bathroom or stay overnight. We had to keep driving. And he kept talking about education and things were going to be different. And I was always thinking about what those words really meant. What would be different? What was an education, And I grew up in a family that acknowledged and reverenced God and education. We didn't have books as I give books today to children. We had magazines, National Geographic, Life magazine, Look magazine, Ebony magazine, because my dad and his job would bring them home. So I loved looking at books because he would say, you have to read the books. And so my exposure as a 5-year-old, soon after we came to New Jersey, around that time, Emmett Till was murdered. And I remember seeing on the magazine,
Wow. Was that Jet?
Jet magazine.
Yeah, that was on the cover of Jet.
It
Yeah.
stayed on my home for a long time. And I remember hearing my grandmother scream, and how she would pray over us and say, I don't want that to happen to you. And so I remember that image of Emmett Till and Mamie Till. Again, I'm still curious about my world that I live in, because my father's telling me all these wonderful things are going to happen. And then I see this image. I grew up in an environment where people got together on Sundays and talked about things that were going on in our world. And education was always at the forefront. Being involved in sports, giving back, being involved in church. So I was a person who loved conversation like you. I love learning from people. And I grew up with a black and white television. And I remember when everyone was coming home to watch different things, I would come home to watch Dick Cavett, Johnny Carson, who were some of the other people who were on daytime. One of my favorite ones, he used to always have Eartha Kitt and James Baldwin on there. He was out of Philadelphia, a talk show host. I can't think of his name. What's that?
I think I know who you mean, and I can't think of his name either.
It'll come to me. But one of my favorite people, because he introduced me to James Baldwin. And so I would run home to listen to people talk, because I remember my school teacher would say to me, I would have to stay after school and as a fourth, fifth grader and write, I will not talk. And I would always have it ahead of time all written out, because I knew I had to stay after school. And there was a sign that said, small minds, great minds discuss great things. And I wanted to be someone who would be able to talk about great things. So growing up, I was exposed to my reality, which is I'm living in civil rights America, from Jim Crow America to civil rights America. And I'm a child of the civil rights movement, and I embraced that. I was involved as a young person in my church, in Girl Scouts, and in the NAACP Youth Council. And it was about maybe 10, 12 years old when I got involved in NAACP Youth Council in Red Bank. And wow, that was exciting to learn about my heroes. My heroes I kept living around these great voices. Roy Wilkinson, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, Fannie Lou Hamer, who had a great influence on me. And I have this book.
Oh, wow. Wow, we're going to talk about Fannie Lou Hamer.
So that's a part of my background. So I educated in the Red Bank public school system, graduated from Neptune High School, went on to Wells College, a women's college in Aurora, New York. My mentor, I had two great mentors as a youth, the Reverend Joan Mackenzie Higgins and Seymour Sigler out of Red Bank High School. And Seymour Sigler saw me as someone in high school, in junior high school when I met him, who he wanted to give me guidance and push me in the right direction. And he wanted me to go to college and be exposed to different things. And I went to Wells, and I went to Wells. From there, I went to Spelman as an exchange student. And from Spelman, I came back to New Jersey and graduated with my bachelor's degree from Rider University. I have a wonderful husband who we've been married now for 49 years, Charles Sumner Stansbury. And we have two wonderful adult children. So here we are. And then my master's degree from the College of New Jersey, Trenton State College. And very early on in my career, I knew I wanted to work in three places, and I've done that. I wanted to work for the Urban League because I grew up hearing Roy Wilkins,
right.
Vernon Jordan, all these great people. And I wanted to work for the Urban League, which I did. I worked for the Community Action Program, Monmouth County Community. So I grew up working in these community action related organizational development, cause-orientated organizations. And so I worked there, and from the Urban League, after I got my master's degree, I set my own consulting practice at age 28.
Wow.
In Trenton, New Jersey. I incorporated myself. I was surrounded by a lot of consultants. And so one of them said to me, I remember it was Nancy Baker, I think, of Nancy Baker and Associates, a very powerful lobbyist and public relations consultant. She says, I want to see you one day go out on your own and have your own consultancy. And I was like 27 years old when she told me that. So I got involved, and I began to shape my ideas as an urban issues thinker into the format of an urban issues public policy consultancy. And that was my consulting practice, Management Interventions, founded and established in 1981 in Trenton, New Jersey, where I lived at that time. And I began to inquire about how I might touch problems that I'm passionate about, such as number one, poverty, equal education, social justice issues. Research informing social change was my approach and still is my approach. And so I have this wonderful life around, and also the curiosity of how art and culture influences social change. All of these things around building partnerships and collaboration that influenced my growing up in Red Bank in the ecumenical youth environment with Reverend Joan Higgins, who as a teenager, aged like 12, 10 years old, I was going to youth retreats, imposing as a 15, 16-year-old. I went and I would go to these retreats, and we would talk about race and unity and love and trying to solve problems. So that idea of change and facilitation and collaboration grew out of those early years in Red Bank, and the passion for change, which is more than a career. It's a call from God to, as Joan Higgins would say to me, get people talking and looking at things differently is how you create change. And that's what I've set out to do. And I've been very fortunate in my consulting practice at Management Interventions for over 40 years. Before that, I was an independent consultant, working on amazing projects, access to the region's core, the tunnel project. I was the only woman-owned, only Black-owned firm on that construction management team. The Urban Women's Centers legislation, which was signed into law by Governor Time Kaine and became a national model for women's empowerment in the mid-'80s. Just wonderful experiences working in public housing, where I'm back now today, where I first started in the community action movement, working with HUD on a national level and Department of Labor. All these things sort of collided with the idea of wanting to see change in my lifetime and wanting to see the American dream for all people. So that's sort of like my story. My husband and I have always been involved together, supporting one another in this mission. My family is totally involved in embracing the Center for Child and Family Achievement grew out of my role as a board member on the Trenton Head Start board. And Head Start was one of my first clients when I started my consulting practice. And someone said to Evelyn McDowell at Rider University, said to me, where I was an EOF mentor, said to me, I really need your help with Trenton Head Start. And I said, oh my goodness, Head Start, my first love. And I was so eager to go. And when I sat at that table, I knew then, Calvin, that it was a call, a purposeful call, that I'd be there. And I made a commitment to remain in Trenton at that time for 5 years, to remain again, because I'd done work there.
When did I know in 2014, Head Start kind of stopped, and it kind of moved on to what you're doing with CCFA, but when did Head Start actually begin?
Head Start actually.
A long time ago.
This is the person right here, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh, wow.
Fannie Lou Hamer and some women from Mississippi and Alabama, the Poor People's Freedom Movement. I don't know, I would have to reference the official name. Got together and they said, our children need to have a Head Start. They need a Head Start, meaning they're lacking so much. And they met with Lyndon Baines Johnson. He went down there and met with them. And they talked about education. And she is one of the founders of Head Start. And that's why I remain connected to that legacy and that vision. And I made a vow to do that. So it started really, it was the first of the war on poverty initiatives. So I would say, I have to go back and really look at that, but I would say somewhere
60s.
around 1960, around 1965, somewhere around there, 1967, because it was the very first, it was a part of the model cities movement and and that work that was being done then. But it came out of the womb of Fannie Lou Hamer and the women in Mississippi and Alabama, particularly, who spoke eloquently and desperately about, and their vision was exactly as it was rolled out. Many people want to give Sergeant Shriver credit for it, or Lyndon Baines Johnson, but they were wonderful collaborators and facilitators, but the cry came from Fannie Lou Hamer.
I wanted to say that when you and I first did our little introductory Zoom, somehow Fannie Lou Hamer came up, and I said to you immediately, because she's been a hero of mine for a long, long time. I said to you immediately, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's what she said. And that is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It's one of the most powerful quotes. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I in my own way, have embraced the civil rights movement, embraced all the positivity about it. I spend an inordinate amount of time reading and learning, continuing to learn about the history. And now I've been watching, I think I mentioned to you, Eyes of the Prize. I'm in my second viewing of it. I just sit and I watch it and I watch it and I watch it. And of course, in the middle of all that is Emmett Till. And I 15 years ago, when I wrote my first novel, there's a part of a chapter that talks about Emmett Till and his mother Mamie. What a brave, amazing woman she was to keep that casket open, to show the world what they did. And actually, Emmett Till was in the news the other day. They was trying to go back and try to prosecute some of the people involved, and they couldn't come up with enough evidence, so they finally, after all these years, dropped that process. But anyway, that was, and I just thought that was so neat that came up when you and I were first talking, because it was important to me. Obviously, it's important to you. So the best way to begin this, it's a semi off topic. We discussed this before we went on air here, because a thrust of this is to educate and teach people out there the work you're doing and what CCFA is all about, and because it is Christmas. And it is the spirit of giving, and Christmas is really all year long, basically. And so we're looking for folks to support and help such a noble cause as CCFA. But two of the tenets, I want to get this right, of CCFA is to deal with poverty and to deal with illiteracy. And I think for the last 50 years or so, on Christmas Eve, I watch A Christmas Carol, written by Charles Dickens in 1843. And I always watched the Alastair Sim version. I think it was made in 1951. And it to me is one of the most beautiful, powerful movies. And there's a theme there. There's a theme that Charles Dickens used, and it deals with ignorance, illiteracy, which is what CCFA deals with, and it deals with poverty,
Mhm.
And of course, CCFA is so much more than that. But the point I'm making is as we reach out to tell people what you're doing, Dickens wrote, and I got a quote because I won't remember this, but this is the power of Charles Dickens in 1843. And the
Mhm.
message is nothing has changed
No,
since
nothing.
1843. That's a
Mhm.
long time ago. But
Mhm.
when towards the end of the movie, when Scrooge is dealing with the ghosts,
Mhm.
and the ghost of Christmas present
Right.
opens up his robe, and there's a little boy and a little girl under the robe, and Scrooge asks, "Who are they?" And the spirit, the ghost of Christmas present, says, "They are man's,
Mm.
and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. The boy is ignorance,
Mhm.
and this girl is want.
Mhm.
Beware them both,
Right.
in all their degree, but most of all, beware this boy,
Mhm.
which is ignorance."
That's
And
right.
so
Beware.
CCFA is
Mhm.
combating illiteracy, and
Mhm.
and that's the tie-in. So if you wanted to comment a little bit about that.
Well, I think, exactly, that's exactly our mission, is bringing the species together, those of us who share the same vision for hope and change, bringing people together around the singular mission of eliminating illiteracy in America and promoting reading, promoting families learning and achieving together, and promoting intelligence in its most purest form, which is the engagement of a book in the home of a child. 60% of the children in America who live in poverty do not own one book.
Wow.
And so, as we look at CCFA today, we have invested over 80,000 books in the homes of children to promote reading, to promote the establishment of a home library, and to inspire school attendance. So when we look at ignorance and we look at the importance of a book, when I first re-entered into Trenton, immersed myself there, in 2013 on that board at Trenton Head Start. And I started listening to the parents and visiting the classrooms and watching parents pick up their children from school. I was at that time the transitional executive director. And I realized something, that parents and children lacked language. There was an absence of language. The pedagogy of the oppressed was right in my face. And I started thinking, and I was so, it was such a painful reality. I was like, what do I do? And so I thought quickly and said, I need books. And I got on the phone and started calling people. I said, I need books tomorrow in this building to give out to families. And I need to talk to them about reading. So I began to think of this idea of just placing a book in a home and what it could do. For one thing, it gives you wonderful artwork because you can see images, you can see images, that inspire and that give language that's positive and productive and counteracts ignorance. This is really my purpose. And so our motto at CCFA is God our hope, books our weapon, education our victory, because we're dealing in a culture that's so crime ridden and compounded with crime and violence and poverty. So that's really our mission, is to close the achievement gap as we know it with, and the Charles Dickens story, it resonates very closely because McCarter Theater is one of our strategic partners.
Mhm.
And when I first founded CCFA, I contacted Emily Mann. I was already serving on their fundraising committee. And I said, I need help. And she said, whatever you need, we have it. So they started out that very first year, the fall of 2014, that Christmas, we took 30 children and their parents, a busload of children, to see A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens.
Wow.
And
Wow.
every year since 2014,
Wow.
the Carter Theater has given me tickets. One year we took as many as about 150 children and families from Trenton to see that play.
Wow.
And one of the parents said, I can't believe it. And I said, what? I always dreamed when I was a kid that I wanted to see that play.
Wow.
And she said, I can't believe I'm going. This is a grandmother raising 2 grandchildren, a part of the CCFA family. So, and we were so fortunate because some of our donors would give us books, and some of them would have the book A Christmas Carol. So they had the experience and the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an amazing, opportunity. So McCarter Theater remains a partner of ours today. And because of the pandemic, we have not been able to take children, but just this recently, we're taking our volunteers, and our parents are going up. But so Charles Dickens, what he says is true. Our greatest enemy in the world is ignorance, anti-intellectualism, and illiteracy. And illiteracy goes very deep because it's bigger than just not knowing how to read. So my mission is to close the achievement gap, to address the 30,000 word lack of exposure that a child growing up in poverty has in America to a child who grows up in middle class, white America with 2 families with an education. That child has not seen or heard 30,000 words by kindergarten, but their white counterpart has, and it's real. On the other hand, to close the literacy gap of the lack of 2,000 words recognition. So that's my mission, is reading is around, everything is centered around the book. Whenever we do any activities, there's always a book connected. We just gave out coats with some of our partners, Christine's Hope for Kids, who's been partnering with us from the very beginning. Over 112 children got brand new coats. They also got books to make a connection. Right. So I don't know if I answered your question, but, and then the issue of wanting. See, one thing, I serve on several committees. One of them is, 2 of them, one is local in New Jersey, and one is on a national level, dealing with issues of violence and gang violence and crime. And Trenton is the collaboration to address violence in Trenton. One of the reasons why we have so much crime in America today, when I talk about street level crime, homicides in impoverished communities, I'm just going to focus on that for a moment. It's because of the lack of language to express one's emotions and the context for once to be able to express their belongingness needs. It goes back to Abraham Maslow, who's one of my great heroes, and who I base our work on Abraham Maslow, as well as Fannie Hamer and all those great thinkers. But the lack of language to express one's emotions and also to connect them to community. And this isolation is a result of not just the poverty, but it is compounded with illiteracy. The poverty creates the alienation, the lack of language further alienates, and therefore, instead of being able to navigate one's thinking and feelings and emotions, it's expressed through violence. Of course, there are issues of, behavioral accountability. We know that, but for the most part, we are dealing with poverty, which is the lack of having your wants met, and ignorance, which is the lack of the ability to read and to express your emotions. Once we begin to really have a system to address that, you will see less gangs, less drug use, less homicides, less murder, and you will see more accountability, more people understanding how to function as a balanced whole human being. But we have to address poverty and we have to address illiteracy, because those are the 2 enemies of the species.
Right.
And poverty, on the perspective of, we could talk about people who are very wealthy, their need to express, to deal with their ignorance of, entitlement and elitism and all those things. But right now I'm talking about impoverished primarily the impoverished Black community, which is where my expertise lies, the impoverished Black and Brown community, and how do we solve this problem that I made a commitment to as a teenager to be a part of ending the war on poverty. And why didn't we win? You know, there are so many brilliant people, and yet we have more poverty today than we had 50 years ago. Our numbers are higher. Our numbers are about 30 to 50% more escalated in terms of how many people live in poverty and below the poverty level. So CCFA is really about equipping the individual, family, and the child with an inspiration and a desire and an understanding of the importance of reading and education and personal responsibility, and getting parents involved in that on a very grassroots level. And I don't know if I answered your question, but
well, Charles, you have, and you've answered actually a few questions I had, but that's fine. Yeah. Just real quick off topic, and I think it's and this is a little bit of a surprise. It's a question I like to ask. I may actually know the answer, but it's an interesting question. I always like to ask, and it's off topic.
So
excluding Wanda, excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend the day with.
Fannie Lou Hamer.
I knew the answer.
Yeah. I like to spend a day with her, and I like to spend a day with Mary, the mother of Jesus, the mother of Christ. But Fannie Lou Hamer, I would like to ask her questions. I would like to get her guidance on how do we solve the problems. What are some of the solutions that she would want? And I
knew you were going to say that. No, she was here in New Jersey for Democratic Convention in Atlantic City.
Yep, 1964. I was 14. I remember seeing it on television.
Yep, she was here, and she was fighting to get their wing of the Democratic Party seated as delegates, and there was a big fight, and there was all kinds of compromises, and Lyndon Johnson sat in the Oval Office there and kind of manipulated some things, and they did some I think they got two from their Freedom Party, that wing seated, if I remember correctly. Yes, but I'd like to. She would be on my extended list as well. Okay, so back to business. Where does this commitment you have to service come from? You've kind of said some things that kind of filled some of this in, but you've got this burning, wonderful passion for service. And maybe it came out of the fact that you and I are contemporaries, and we came out of that period in human history when service was very important. And you know, I'm assuming that's where it kind of came from.
It was cultivated there, nurtured in that period in the the 60s. The early 60s, and also environmentally, again, as I said, the Girl Scouts, the Interfaith Youth Council. But I see the commitment as a call from God that comes from His greater being that is greater than I, and a love for people. And it comes out of, we think about people like Cheney, right? We think about those college students that were murdered, and the pain that it comes out of, the passion to serve comes out of the pain of the reality of the times we live in.
You're talking about James Cheney.
James Cheney, and the other individuals who were with him. I
Goodman and Schwerner and Cheney.
Yep, sworn into, yeah, you know, it comes out of the pain of seeing that, of seeing the four girls bombed in the church,
16th Street Baptist Church.
Street Baptist Church. The pain gives you the
Yeah.
passion to serve. Um, you know, seeing Fred Hampton assassinated, Martin Luther King, and then the journey there. Over the years, I've been very fortunate to meet Rosa Parks. I met her in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
I worked with Coretta Scott King, which was extremely transformative. Edith Savage Jennings, I worked with her. Shirley Chisholm, I worked for over a decade with her.
Wow.
So to have had these exposures to people who, but that period of the 60s, 1960 through 1970, but particularly that window, 1960, 1967, we were all touched in a different way, but certainly our generation needs to sort of like re-encounter ourselves, because I experienced a lot of encounter. I was involved in a lot of encounter groups as a young person, encountering race very close up, and racism, and making a commitment to be, when I heard Malcolm X say, by any means necessary, and then, that the idea of being a part of the solution and not the problem, and John F. Kennedy, ask not what your country can do for you, but you can do for your country. All these words, this language, James Baldwin and all. So all these things, but being inspired by God, and not at all sick and tired of being sick and tired, because I'm not sick and I'm not tired, but I'm inspired every day by children, by hope. I do believe in hope, and I have strong faith in people. I've been blessed with so many wonderful people like yourself and my amazing son-in-law, Dr. Michael Anthony Gallo Jr., and our donors, people that are investors in CCFA, Deborah Sands Grottenberg of the George and Estelle Sands Foundation, and Christine's Hope for Kids, Jean and John, the work they do, all of these partners that are real people who believe in what we do. One simple wish, the work that Danielle and her team, they're doing, they empower us. And so I spent a lot of time doing the research on how we can change the human condition, and what my responsibility is. And I'm having fun with it. As we're speaking Christmas, we're speaking about Christmas, right? The women and the community organizers in Trenton at the Wilson Homes, the public housing development, we're doing a Christmas grab and go. The pandemic poses many difficult challenges today. So we found ourselves being more creative, more inspired during the pandemic to get our mission fulfilled, which is the toolkit. The toolkit, what's the toolkit? The toolkit will be whatever a child lacks that they need to inspire education. Chromebooks, one of our wonderful donors, just before the pandemic, the year before the pandemic, almost a year to that date, Deborah Sands Grottenberg invested in our digital initiative, where 70 fourth graders at Gregory School took home their own Chromebooks that they would own and have, the very first time ever in the District of Trenton education. And when the pandemic hit, those students, 50 of them, day one, got on their own Chromebooks. They didn't have to wait for someone to bring them. That was great, right?
That's great.
So the toolkit, that's what I'm all about. The toolkit, the Chromebooks.
That's great.
Creating equity in education must become the focal point for us to solve many of these problems, where we know the teachers work very hard in all school districts, but we know there is a disparity in terms of the lack of resources and access in impoverished urban and rural Black and Brown America and white America. There is a digital divide, a equity divide.
Yep.
And so we're looking to close that by partnering with schools. I love public education. I'm a product of public education. I love teachers. My background is filled with educators throughout my family. So my husband is an educator, retired educator and administrator. So education is everything. Education, our victory. So, you know, what we're doing now in this moment today is getting ready for Saturday to give, CCFA will be impacting about 150 children, 50 families, over 50 families actually, but 50 families at Wilson Homes Public Housing in Trenton will get bags, tote bags, filled with books.
That's great.
Filled with books, filled with family games that they can play checkers, Scrabble, Uno, all the word games, you know, Connect Four, there's some basketballs, but inspiring learning together and some nice little treats to let them know that we love them, that life is sweet, it's not all bitter. So whatever we do, it's always backed up by books, you know, and that's important. So this idea of giving to children, to let them know, as Abraham Maslow taught us all, we have to teach people how to feel that they are safe, that basic need. A book makes a child feel safe, okay? That makes them feel they belong. It makes them know that you see them. In addition to learning how to read and promoting education, it's a connection, you know? So I don't know if I've answered your question, but we're passionate about the toolkit. You know, we're working now in Mississippi, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Just this week, we activated, actually last week, the actual items are being shipped down to Mississippi by one of our volunteers. And so we're doing an outreach in Mississippi. We are doing outreach in Mount Sterling, Kentucky, in Chattanooga. We're doing outreach in North Carolina. It's all being done by parents and volunteers on the ground level. And I get the wonderful opportunity to inspire and be inspired by all of them, and to see children read. So this is what it's all about, you know, is helping a child feel that they are really a part of the species. And it dispels the anger and the anxiety, you know. A quick story, we talk about ignorance, right? When we established CCFA, we did a proof of concept with Dr. Stephen Payne, and Fania Gallo was in charge of leading up the research instrument. And we interviewed about 100 families from Head Start. And then we broke it down to a focus group. And in the focus group, I want to listen to families and talk to them about this work and introduce it. And one of the things we shared with them was the data on the impact of violent video games on learning and attention deficit and behavior. And one of the parents who was involved herself in a lot of street-related activity, she said right in the focus group, I'm not gonna let my child be a statistic. I'm getting rid of the violent games. I'm throwing out the PlayStation. No one's gonna smoke marijuana in my house, weed in my house anymore. No one's gonna drink alcohol. In that workshop, in that focus group, and she heard the data that said your child, if these things are happening in your home, your child will most likely be dead before 18, go to prison, not earn a living, be arrested for a violent crime. She said, I am not gonna do that.
Wow.
Okay, and today, her children are outperforming educationally, and she relocated to another town. That's all I'm gonna say.
Wow.
Okay, but it was because she was confronted with the information, which is knowledge about the consequences of ignorance. And that's what Charles Dickens is trying to say to all of us. The consequence of ignorance. Hate is a type of ignorance. We could talk about that another time.
Yeah.
Race is a type of ignorance. White supremacy is a type of ignorance, but we're talking about how do we address the issue of poverty in America, and how do we get children and parents and people moving forward to be fully productive and participating citizens in the American dream? It's going to only be through education and the idea of a family, what a family looks like and how it moves together to give support. So that's a quick story on
Great
when you
story.
present the data, that a person makes a decision that this is not how I want my life to look. And we presented that data to all the parents, and every parent, we had a buy-in by 20 parents. And all of those parents, except for one of them, I'm in contact with today. And their children are doing beautifully. Their children are now 6th and 7th graders. Okay, one of them is an 8th grader. And a couple of them are 8th graders, because we had 20, and they were 6th, 7th, and 8th graders today. And those children are doing amazing.
Mm.
The 5th grader today, the children that were with us in our cohort group, all of them were reading on grade level and above grade level by 2nd grade. Many of them went into kindergarten reading on the 1st and 2nd grade reading level.
Wow, wow. You sent me a few videos I started to watch this morning. There was this delightful young girl who was holding 2 books. I think her name was Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever was interviewing her, I don't know what grade she was in, 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Mm-hmm.
But she was so eloquent,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm listening and I'm saying to myself, it's like, oh, wow. She's just so eloquent and so well spoken.
Mm-hmm.
And she's holding the 2 books, and she wanted to be a writer.
Oh, yes, Lisa, yes. I can tell. She has a Dr. Seuss sign.
Yes.
Okay, I have
and I got such a charge out of that because, I'm kind of a writer. When I see that and I hear it and I see it, I'm just looking at she's just a young girl, and she's so motivated and charged up, and she's holding those books.
Yes.
So, if for me, as I'm learning about CCFA, it's great stuff, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And it happens through, not to interrupt you, but it happens through partnerships. Now, prior to that interview, Lisa, that previous school year.
She was at the Gregory School.
Yeah, at the Gregory School. That's the backdrop for many of the things you're seeing. Lisa, along with the whole entire school, every year we would do a end of the year literacy Read to Achieve festival. And we would have authors come in and do workshops about their books.
Oh,
and
wow.
My husband, Charles Stansbury, every year came to do a workshop on how to write a book. So that year, before that interview, she had that previous year gone to a workshop that he conducted on how to write a book. And the children walked away from his workshop with a little mini book. So it's what we expose a person to that dispels ignorance and illiteracy and the anger and diffuses the hopelessness. And Lisa, I have to tell another quick story about her. Lisa, who has been with me since kindergarten, is an achieving, aspiring reader as well. Lisa would come down to my office because I had an office in the building that my wonderful friend, Michael Rosenberg, the principal at Gregory School at that time, it opened up for me with him because he understood. And see, we have to understand that there are relationships that you develop in life that culturally connect people together just as well as spiritually. And throughout my life as a child growing up in Red Bank to my life today, I have been very fortunate to have very strong relationships with the Jewish community. And I'm saying that because it needs to be said. And it's always been an understanding about the value for education, the authenticness of understanding the struggle that I face as a Black woman. So when Michael Rosenberg and I, when I met him and I said, look, I'm closing down my site at Calhoun and Bellevue. And basically, I'm going to be homeless because I know my work is done there with my cohort group. And I want to be closer to kids in the classroom. You know what he said to me that day? And I was doing a book fair in the Trenton Board of Education parking lot, giving away, that summer we were giving away like 3,000 books. And he said to me, come to Gregory School and just be there. Come there and be with me. And I said, really? I said, you're kidding. I said, that's what I want more than anything else. He invited me into his school building.
Wow.
And we figured it all out after that.
Wow.
But that is a connection that I've always had as a young girl with thought leaders and people in the business world who come from the Jewish community. All communities, but I'm saying there's a comfort level there for me.
Great.
And so Michael Rosenberg, who I hope at some point hears this interview, he is really one of my champions for CCFA because he taught me so much about what I needed to learn in the school building. And when I would come to him with something, he would always say, let's go, just go do it. We'll talk about it later. Or I'd say, Mr. Rosenberg, what do you think? And he'd say, good, go, do it. And we would do things. And we had that camaraderie. And he understood the pedagogy of the oppressed, and he understood the systems. Because I'm coming from the business world now. I'm coming from corporate America. I'm coming from a different orientation. And so we had such great energy together. And he really helped CCFA go to a different dimension of our creativity and our problem solving, because he knew the unspoken of what I wanted to get accomplished. And he invited me in.
That's great.
It was wonderful. And then the State Board of Education and the city began to understand this unique partnership. And it began to impact the city of Trenton because other partners came to the Trenton Board of Education and wanted to unite. I brought the United Way into the Trenton Board of Education, into the school system. Different partners came in. The Princeton Area Community Foundation, as a result, began a partnership. So many other people. We did a robotics initiatives, and the gentleman who created the Judge Harvoni. I apologize for not having his name off the top of my head, but he donated money for a robotics program. People started coming. And so it's all about partnerships and relationships and being willing to be vulnerable and to say what you need and what you don't have. I'm not trying to be anyone other than who I am in this moment, and allowing others to grow, particularly the parent, empowering the parent. We did a parent cafe, the very first time ever in the city of Trenton, a meeting with parents in school buildings with children, and Michael Rosenberg allowed me to have children come with their parents come into the building and do a workshop on vision boards, on team building, communications, mindfulness. All that happened at that school.
That's great.
It's wonderful. So it's all about building partnerships. It's all about, operating out of the one species model, not being intimidated. I'm not intimidated by, the amount of money I need or the amount of money I don't have, because I know that God will bring the people who want to partner with us. And we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate to have the philanthropy of Susan Roeder Hansen and Dr. George Hansen, who came to visit with me on Calhoun and Bellevue Street, a renowned pediatrician and medical doctor in New Jersey. And he gave us great guidance and support and inspiration for what we're doing. So all of these things matter, and I think are very solvable if we can get back to real relationship building across political and religious and ethnic lines, and just what is the problem we want to solve and how do we inform it? That's the real issue.
Perfect. Well, I just wanted to, I wanted to let people know, and I'm gonna have it flashed on the screen, that if they go to ccfatrenton.com,
And they can go to .org also.
okay,
.org.
.org, and there's all kinds of ways for people to help and support,
Yes.
donate, books and funds, and because your work is just, it's marvelous, and I've plunged myself into it. So we're going to kind of wind down. I will exhort you to come back here, and we can have an on. We'll talk about that off camera, and come back, and we can put together some program. I mean, it's virtually unlimited what we can do, but your whole model, your whole spirit needs, people need to see it. And in some small way, that's part of my mission. So, Wanda.
So, Calvin, I think that you're awesome. Now it's our mission. We're together.
Yeah, we are.
Together. Now you're a partner. This is so awesome.
I certainly am. And I believe in this. And I need to wish you a Merry Christmas and a happy, healthy New Year, and only good things. And I'm so excited you gave the time to do this, and that's just great. No, it is great. And we are forever, you know what, we're forever bonded.
Yes.
By Fannie Hamer, because like I said, she's been a hero. And actually, I'm promoting myself. I don't do that much, but in my novel, which I finished and I'm editing it, there's a little thing about Fannie Hamer in here as well. Yes. So
I'm going to have to get your first book, and of course look for the second novel.
Yes, I have to get that. We'll talk about that
yes.
Because I have that thing about Emmett Till and his mother. It's pretty heavy, but we got to cut off, and please come back. And again, a merry, happy, healthy. I am so thrilled that we met. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Wanda. To be continued.